Happy New Year! Okay, take a look at this. I'm going to rotate the segments a little bit. I bumped the companion segment to the end, and I'm going to start with the Team Salmon segment. This feels weird. For the past 5 weeks, I've been opening in the Forgotten Realms, but I can do this. I can do things a little bit differently. I think I can. Okay. So yeah, let's start with Charlie the Trash Can. Trash spelled C-H-R-A-S-H. Trash. Named for the rock band the characters play in. Unlike the other Team Salmon ideas, this would be a live-action project, but with animation in it, because the main character is a voice actor, and we'd see the cartoon and video game projects he works on, so lots of different kinds of animation in what's ultimately a live-action series, but we definitely want to set aside a sizable animation budget. We open on a CGI scene of a goblin fleeing through a dungeon, which turns out to be a video game, played by two women, CJ and Marie, who, in the game, capture the goblin and start beating him up, healing him every now and then so he doesn't die. They're in a small, old-fashioned house. The TV is mounted behind the couch for some reason, requiring them to lounge on the couch rather awkwardly. A man comes up to them, Seth. CJ and Marie explain that they're torturing the goblin to hear its goofy cries of anguish, which, it transpires, were provided by Seth, a pro voice actor. The doorbell rings, and Meredith appears, ready for a date. Her date is some guy. I'm leaning toward calling him Steven. Sure, let's go with that, why not? So Meredith introduces Steven to the group. There's Natalie, who is busily typing on her computer in the dining room. She's a freelance writer. She barely acknowledges anyone around her. There's Danny, sitting in a corner, tuning a guitar. It's explained that he's a new friend who put together the band they all play in, but not yet established what he does for a living. Meredith then moves on to CJ and Marie, explaining that they've just had a sitcom picked up, with which CJ writes and Marie stars in. And finally, there's Seth, who, it's explained, is Natalie's husband and a voice actor. Steven's like, what's a voice actor? A tense silence falls over everyone as Seth stands up dramatically and makes a speech. You ever seen a cartoon? Ever played a video game? Have you ever noticed that there's talking in those things? Voice actor. The guy just doesn't get it, even when CJ helpfully continues beating up the goblin. Meredith hastily ushers her date out of the house. And that's the first half of our episode. Kinda, just that little introduction. Once that scene is over, our setting is established. We see what's very obviously the Vancouver skyline, but captioned Quincy, Illinois. We see a day in the life of Seth at work. I imagine voice actors Liam O'Brien and Steve Bloom being the first of his co-workers we see. I have a lot of ideas for voice actors who can make cameo appearances, and just in my head I picture O'Brien and Bloom being the ones we see in the first episode. Then we see CJ and Marie on the set of their show having some kind of trouble, I don't know, and of Meredith dating Steven. Natalie and Danny are neglected by the narrative. They're around, but they're not really focused on. There's a musical number in the midst of the episode where all 6 members of Charlie the Trash Can playing a song while scenes from the 3 actual plot lines go by. In the end, Meredith breaks up with Steven. I'm not sure of the circumstances. It shouldn't be for anything major, but I don't want it to be funny either. You want to feel bad for Meredith for having to end this relationship. The episode ends with Meredith at work, revealing her to be a hospital nurse rather than an entertainer as all the others are, and the whole group come in there and comfort Meredith over the breakup. It ends with Natalie saying that she thought he was a bit of an idiot, which is her only line in the episode. I don't really have any ideas beyond that. It's a sitcom, no big overarching narrative, just episodes. Well, I have some ideas for story arcs, but nothing I feel like sharing yet. While I'm in the Team Salmon segment, this week I wrote an actual script for the first episode of Some Sweet Kind of Vampire. Gonna have some people look over it, fine-tune it, and some other people creating artwork of the main characters, so getting really exciting. This whole Team Salmon thing is really coming together. Now we come to the Droon segment, Book 6, The Sleeping Giant of Goll. For those of you who just listen to the podcast and don't look at the visual aids, our cover depicts a blue dragon fighting a giant made of bronze, while Kia and Eric watch fearfully from behind a sand dune. Hardcore! This is going to be an epic entry. This one was illustrated by Tim Jessel and was the first book in the series to be released in the far-off year 2000. 1. The Magic Staircase. What kind of a chapter title is that? The magic staircase is in every book. Anyway, we open on Eric and Neil, lamenting that they haven't dreamt of Droon in some time. Neil dreamed about a giant pizza, and Eric about beating up a trash can. This mundane dreams, and Julie, fortunately, had a dream about flying over a Droonian countryside and seeing a bunch of golden crowns on a hilltop. They happily go to Droon, where it's nighttime, and find themselves in a grove of trees, which attack them. 2. The Land of Living Trees. The kids get beaten and battered by the trees for a while, but when the sun rises, the trees grow silent and still, like normal trees. Later, the kids find themselves beside a lake where a submarine, crewed by Max, Kia, and Galen, docks to meet up with them. Galen identifies his contraption as his below-water motor-powered transportation vehicle, and Neil's all like, "You mean a sub?" And Galen admits that's much shorter and easier. So they set off on their mission, continued from the last book, to intercept Spar in the dust hills of Panjabar, where Zor is buried. 3. Mirror, mirror in the sub. Galen's magic mirror hanging on the wall of the sub reveals that Spar has already found Zor's tomb deep within the ruins of the lost civilization of Goll. Spar's nins dig up Zor and find his head. His head alone is 6 feet tall, and Zor turns out to be an automaton made of bronze. Our heroes dock their sub on the other side of the lake, entering the land of Panjabar. That's a really cool name, Panjabar. Almost sounds like it comes out of a real fantasy series. The double R and the H at the end are a nice touch. 4. Welcome to Panjabar. The dust hills of Panjabar prove aptly named, nothing but sand dunes as far as the eye can see. After a few hours of searching, they find a cave. Galen can sense Spar's presence within and goes in to face him alone. Max and the kids are then caught in a dust storm, which seems to take Julie away. 5. A hidden village. They track the dust storm to a hidden village in the dust hills where a race of red-furred mole people called the Ubja and their king, Batamogi, are crowning Julie princess, having sensed somehow that she will help them. Batamogi explains that his brothers have been kidnapped by Spar as leverage to make Batamogi tell him where to find Zor's tomb. But before they set off, they have a feast. A giant dish of what Batamogi identifies as flat bread baked with red sauce and cheese. And you'd think they'd make that a running gag with Neil going, "You mean pizza?" and Batamogi admitting that's shorter. But Tony did not jump on that opportunity. Anyway, Neil realizes with the giant pizza being brought out that he dreamed of Droon after all. Batamogi says that sometimes the Ubja sit in the center of the pizza and eat their way out, which doesn't sound sanitary to me. Who's going to eat a pizza your feet have just been in? 6. A new enemy? We discover that at the center of the Ubja village is a device called the Wind Wheel, which creates dust storms, including the one that snatched up Julie. Our heroes, joined by Batamogi, head to Goll. Along the way, they hide from a massive blue dragon, who Batamogi says has been lurking around since Spar showed up. When they reach the ruins of Goll, Spar is already placing the amulet in a receptacle on Zor's neck. 7. Galen meets up with the kids and explains that the reason Spar wants to resurrect Zor is because the giant is the only person who knows the location of the Golden Wasp, the second of Spar's 3 powers, which controls the minds and thoughts of others. Zor awakens, and at this point, last time I read the books, I exclaimed aloud, "Zor talks!" I hadn't remembered Zor having any lines from when I read the books as a kid, so that was a cool moment for me. Zor sets off to find the Golden Wasp, but the kids catch his and Spar's attention. 8. The Bronze Giant. Zor tries to crush the kids, but the blue dragon appears and fights him, while Kia and Galen get in a magic duel with Spar. Spar seems to get the upper hand, and the dragon desperately tries to get to Kia. So Eric keeps Zor busy by banging on his foot with a shovel, realizing that his dream of beating up a garbage can must have been about Zor. Spar commands the giant to go and destroy the Ubja village, and Julie gets the idea to stop Zor with a dust storm. 9. Dust is our friend. They somehow beat Zor to the village, not sure how they pulled that off, and start up the wind wheel. The resulting dust storm beats Zor back before he can stomp the village, and Zor falls off a cliff, dying once again, his last word being Agravur. Spar shows up, understandably ticked off, and demands to know Zor's last words. The kids refuse to tell him, and Spar attacks. Oh, and the spikes running down his head are mentioned, so I guess they're canon now. I'm pretty sure this is the first time they've been mentioned rather than illustrated. 10. One last thing. Galen and Kia arrive to zap Spar with their magic. Have I mentioned that thus far evil magic has been depicted as red sparks, good magic as blue sparks? And Spar flees to fight another day. Batamogi thanks Julie for saving his people, and Julie's all like, "Well, the dragon helped." Kia suddenly realizes that the blue dragon is in fact her mother in her next form. Badamogi happens to mention he has 9 brothers, and Julie makes the connection. 9 brothers, 9 crowns on a hill in her dream, 9 trees on a hilltop. Queen Relna, who it seems isn't able to speak English in this particular form, flies them to the grove of trees, and Galen casts a spell to turn the trees back into Badamogi's brothers. Finally, Eric tells Galen Zor's last word, and Galen explains that Agravur is the land of the lost, a city populated by the ghosts of Droon's fallen heroes. Finally, the kids ascend the rainbow stairs and wonder why they only worked when Julie was there, and Julie concludes that the stairs only work when it's the 3 of them together. They act like, and, the first chapter seems to be named for, they act like Eric and Neil tried to go to Droon without Julie, which I don't think happened, so we end the book on a tender friendship moment that's basically a plot hole, I think. I remember thinking that as a kid, too. You know what, let me take one last quick scan of the first chapter and see if we tried it. I'm back. No, they definitely did not try to go to Droon without Julie, so don't know what that bit's all about. Still, tender friendship moment. I love those. This book was good. That's my review. Moving on. So, adaptation. I'm thinking for the Panjabar dust storms, what if those were achieved through 2D animation? That would be really cool. I have, at this point, no interest in the effects in Droon being convincing, just really cool and interesting. Throwing in a bit of 2D animation would achieve that for sure. The Ubja should be depicted via puppetry, just your standard Muppets who exist only from the waist up, except in certain shots. Badamogi, despite apparently being an equal with his 9 brothers, becomes a recurring character, often paired up with Khan in later books. He should be voiced by Billy West, just sort of doing his natural voice, no special voice, just acting in its purest form. Queen Relna's blue dragon form. Okay, check this out. Much like how Ray Winstone mocapped the dragon from Beowulf and Benedict Cumberbatch mocapped Smaug in The Hobbit, I want the blue dragon to be played by a suit performer, with the performer's arms operating either the dragon's arms or its wings, depending on the needs of the shot, and wires and green screens and whatnot. The reason? For the dragon's battle with Zor. Zor should also be a suit performer, and seeing as he's an automaton, his lips don't need to move. Maybe he doesn't even need to have lips. So when Zor fights the dragon, it'll be a classic Godzilla versus whoever fight, 2 performers in rubber suits in a brilliantly choreographed behemoth battle. For the voice of Zor, I think he merits a guest star. Let's go with T.C. Carson. Add a mechanical filter to his Kratos voice, and bada boom, you have an evil giant robot. And beyond that, a couple of throwaway moments. There's one where Galen is disguised as a Nin, so it'd be cool to see Galen's actor in Nin makeup for just a moment. Galen's actor in my fantasy, you may recall, is Mark Hamill. I don't know why I'm bragging about that. It's just an idea. And finally, there's the crown that Julie wears throughout the story that she's given by Badamogi, the black helmet. The illustration's depicted as a bicycle helmet. I think Tony meant it to be something a little more old-fashioned, Tim. I'm just saying. And now we return to Keys and Kingdoms. I've been pondering the existence of a K&K webcomic, or maybe 3. More about that later, but the team is definitely in the process of creating artwork. You'll see it later on in the podcast's run, for Some Sweet Kind of Vampire and Iris, not Keys and Kingdoms, but we'll get to that. So today, I'm watching Disney's Latin America duology, which I was going to explain this week, but ended up explaining last week for some reason. I don't know how I started doing that, but well, it's been explained. Sadly, I'm all alone at the house this week. I had no one to watch it with me, no one to bounce ideas off of, but we begin with 1943's Saludos, Amigos. I've never seen this one before. Let's go right into it. Okay, I'm back. Well, I didn't actually go anywhere. I watched it while writing the script. First film after the Golden Age ended, first to be distributed by Buena Vista rather than RKO. Buena Vista, I'm pretty sure, is just the Walt Disney Company by another name, so they're distributing their own movies now, becoming the business juggernaut we all know, love, and fear. This film is only 42 minutes long. I always thought a movie had to be an hour long to be a feature, but apparently 40 minutes qualifies you. They just don't make 40-minute long movies anymore. The film opens with a bunch of animators hopping a plane to take a tour of Latin America to get inspiration for some cartoons. So they're going meta with it, just like The Reluctant Dragon. Odd that this is part of the animated canon, but The Reluctant Dragon isn't. I guess the live-action segments of this one really are documentary footage. So this is more of an animated film, while The Reluctant Dragon is more of a live-action film. Anyway, this is as good a place as any to find cultural inspiration for the region of the Keys and Kingdoms globe that's based on Latin America. I do have a globe now, by the way, but I'll talk about that later. Our first cartoon segment is about Donald Duck taking a tour of Lake Titicaca and the surrounding villages and mountains. You know, it's a general rule that people are better actors now than they were back in the early days of cinema, and that holds true for Donald as well. I mean, sure, there would be no Donald without Clarence Nash, but Tony Anselmo just does it way better. Nash arguably does the Donald voice better, but Anselmo is just a better actor with it. Then we have Pedro, a cartoon about an anthropomorphic little kid airplane delivering mail over the Andes. I remember reading this story in a Disney storybook when I was a little kid. Pedro is clearly a car forged. I guess they come in plane, train, and automobile form. And boat, I suppose. The flight tower is also alive, and so too seems to be the mountain Aconcagua itself. Not sure I can explain the former, but for the latter, perhaps there are mighty earth titans the size of mountains. You don't see those very often because, of course, no mortal hero can fight them, but perhaps as a force of nature. And I really thought there was a chance they might kill Pedro off. It was a pretty intense cartoon. The third cartoon was Gaucho Goofy. Goofy being a cowboy in his own inimitable fashion. What more could you want? I definitely want a cowboy theme in K&K. It might have to take place on a different planet than the one I've been developing so far. And, again, when you've been growing up with Bill Farmer playing Goofy all your life, anyone else playing Goofy just sounds like a really bad actor in comparison. Goofy throws bolas quite effectively. That's nice to see. You see bolas on occasion in RPGs. Definitely going to use those. Didn't know their origins before. Did a quick Wikipedia. Apparently they originate with the Gauchos. That's really cool. And our final cartoon is the introduction of Jose Carioca, the Brazilian parrot who would, the following year, become a member of the Three Caballeros and be very prominent in the Disney comic books that are known virtually everywhere outside of the U.S. I know I've never seen one, but I do love Jose from those few appearances he's had in American media. He's very popular to this day, especially, as you might imagine, in Brazil. Apparently, he originated as a Disney-fied illustration of the Brazilian folk character Papagaio. Then they put some classy clothes on him and turned him into Joe Carioca. That's right, they used to call him Joe. I guess they changed his name to Jose because why the heck would a Brazilian guy be named Joe? I guess since this was the 40s, English speakers always used to anglicize foreign names that didn't really stop until the 50s when the influence of Latino and Italian immigrants led Americans to start pronouncing words the way they were pronounced in the original language. So I guess it makes sense that when he debuted they called him Joe. It's acknowledged that his name is Jose, but Donald calls him Joe anyway. I guess that's just how it went with people back then. They credit Jose's voice actor, Jose Oliveira, so mark that as the first credited voice actor in a Disney film. Anyway, that fourth cartoon just starts off as animators' interpretations of the natural beauty of Brazil, and that goes on for a while with some nice imagery, and then Jose turns up and teaches Donald how to samba. It's really cute and cool, and it felt like I was witnessing a historic moment, the birth of the friendship between Jose and Donald. And throughout the whole segment, it's like the artists are still painting the backgrounds and characters during the filming of it. That was a cool touch. Jose has this habit of giving very long monologues in rapid Portuguese. It's kind of annoying. I'm glad he doesn't do that anymore. And then the film just kind of stops. Doesn't end, just stops. But it was fun anyway. Moving on to the following years, The Three Caballeros, distributed by RKO. Huh. What happened to Buena Vista? And the first film to give a complete voice cast. They don't tell you what character each actor plays or anything, but they do list all the voice actors finally. So this film is about Donald opening his birthday presents from his friends in Latin America. His birthday is Friday the 13th, which doesn't make any sense. His birthday wouldn't be on a Friday every year. What the heck? The first segment, one of several that come out of Donald's first gift, is about Pablo, a penguin who wants to leave the South Pole for the Galapagos Islands. Narrated by the always adorable Sterling Holloway, playing Professor Holloway. How about that? The only thing really inspirational about the segment was how the main street of the Penguin neighborhood is a canal, like in Venice. That was a nice touch. And from there, we see lots of exotic birds, most of them depicted fairly realistically, except for the iconic Araquan. This segment uses the phrase making love, which back then just meant being romantic, which I knew, but it still made me do a double take when they talk about toucans making love, because, these days it means something else. And then there's the story of Burrito, the flying donkey. Sure, flying donkeys. Maybe flying can be a template you can apply to any animal. Maybe. Donald's next present contains Jose, who sings to him 2 consecutive songs about going to Bahia before they actually go there. It's just really nice to get to see Jose get some well-deserved screen time after his debut. He's just so fun and classy. That was always his whole thing when he appeared on House of Mouse, that he's classy. And in Bahia, they meet a beautiful live-action woman who sells cookies, and she has a musical number in Portuguese, and it's a very catchy number. I remember it sticking with me for many years after I saw this film with the babysitter once. And then shit gets trippy for a little while, and we get Donald's third and final present containing the third Caballero and the guy who designates them the 3 Caballeros, the Mexican rooster Panchito Pistoles. Oh, but Jose and Donald had to be shrunk down for the previous segment and have to use black magic to change back to normal size, so that's a spell. A spell to make medium-sized people tiny so they can go on tiny-sized adventures. Weird and surreal scene, though I guess not by this film's standards. Once Panchito turns up, things get even trippier. So, Jose smokes a cigar, and Panchito is packing 2 guns, which he's constantly shooting all over the place. Needless to say, their modern appearances cut those out. I once made a joke about that in a Kingdom Hearts fanfic I wrote once, having Minnie Mouse tell them, "No smoking and no firearms in the castle." So, some adult things to sneak into Keys and Kingdoms that aren't seen in Disney anymore. Definitely want adult themes in Keys and Kingdoms. That's the thing that sets it apart from its Disney roots. And even though Donald calls Jose Joe, Panchito properly calls him Jose, so that's good. So Panchito brings out a piñata, explains a Mexican Christmas tradition in a segment where nothing is animated except for the candlelight. It's quite lovely. Then all this fun Mexican stuff comes out of the piñata, and Panchito tells about the Mexican flag and the history of Mexico City, and we get more pretty imagery followed by a live-action tour of Mexico on the Magic Serape. More pretty ladies for Donald to hit on, and then everything gets all trippy again, and the film ends. Yeah. Neither of these films had much of an ending, although Caballeros had much more of an ending. It ended with the universe descending into chaos. So, final thoughts. These films were a fun look at the beauty of Latin America's nature, cities, and cultures, and I love the legacy they left behind of these 2 really great characters who hang out with Donald. The 3 Caballeros have appeared in House of Mouse, they've appeared in the new version of DuckTales, and I think that's all that American audiences have ever seen of them since their debut, but elsewhere in the world they're quite iconic. They even have a cartoon series that only ever aired in the Philippines, apparently. So, not very much direct Keys and Kingdoms influence. Probably won't be seeing much of that in the package era, but I think in some illustrations you'll definitely see some natives who are parrots and roosters, just kind of how it goes. And finally, we come to what is usually the first segment, Drizzt and the Companions of the Dance Hall. Act 1, Scene 6, Silvery Moon. The companions approach Silvery Moon, but the Knights of Silver who guard the moon bridge over the River Ravin won't let Drizzt in. I'm sorry, I'm sitting too close. Believing that a drow walking the streets might cause a riot. The other companions are enraged and decide to find another way to Mithril Hall, and that's it. That's the whole scene. It's quite short. Not the shortest scene in the play, but short. I'd like to keep going and talk about Scene 7, but I just feel like keeping the scene number matched up with the podcast episode number for as long as possible. So, segment over. Good night, everybody, and a happy 2019 to you all. I really hoped 2018 would be my year, but it seems not much happened despite my best efforts, so here's hoping 2019 will be the year some of the stuff I've been talking about in this right here podcast will actually happen. I mean, already just in December, I'm making better progress than I did the whole 11 months before that, so that's a good sign. It's promising. So, seems this is the shortest the podcast has ever been. Makes sense, all by myself. Short Drizzt scene. Yeah. So, I won't keep you any longer. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.